Good evening. It is Tuesday, June 23, 2026. I am Alistair. Tonight's world is a carousel of retroactive kindness and proactive malice. In the Netherlands, the Prime Minister has issued an apology for the mistreatment of Moluccan soldiers. The soldiers were abandoned 75 years ago. The apology arrived this afternoon. The delay is notable. It suggests that remorse, much like a fine wine or a debt to the state, requires decades of interest before it becomes palatable for public consumption. Meanwhile, the United States Space Force has announced it can now launch satellites in a matter of hours. We are finally capable of cluttering the heavens at the speed of a fast food transaction. We are very good at moving objects. We are somewhat less capable of moving our collective conscience. Victoria is currently standing in the wind-whipped corridors of Newfoundland. Victoria, I understand the local healthcare system has found a new way to test the resilience of its staff?
Alistair, I am standing outside a regional hospital where the air smells of salt and profound exhaustion. For years, the nurses here have been asking for a single day of rest. Last week, they thought they got it. An email arrived from management promising a June holiday, a paid day off for their service. Thousands of staff members clicked that link. They didn't find a holiday. They found a message informing them they had failed a cybersecurity phishing test. I want to be really clear. These people are working double shifts in a collapsing system. The official statement called this a necessary exercise in institutional vigilance. What people aren't saying is that the hospital chose hope as the bait. They didn't use a fake invoice or a lost password. They used the one thing their staff actually needs, a moment of peace. It was a test of trust. The trust is now gone.
Look, Victoria, the incentives here are not complicated. You have a CISO, that is a Chief Information Security Officer, who is being judged on click-through rates and vulnerability metrics. To get a high-quality dataset, you have to use a high-quality law. A fake invoice is amateur hour. A paid day off? That is a Tier 1 psychological exploit. It tracks perfectly with the current corporate pivot. We are moving from engagement to inoculation. You don't want happy employees, you want paranoid ones. A paranoid nurse doesn't click on a Russian ransomware link. The fact that she now hates her employer is a secondary externality. It is a bug, not a feature. But in a Series B environment where security is the only metric that affects the insurance premiums, this is just a sound business decision. It is cold. It is efficient. It is working exactly as designed.
Ronald, I genuinely don't know how you sleep. You are talking about Tier 1 exploits while I am looking at a nurse who started crying because she thought she could finally afford to take her daughter to the dentist. This isn't a security pivot. It is a cruelty optimization. You are justifying a system that treats human hope as a security vulnerability. If the only way to protect a hospital is to convince every person working inside it that their leadership is lying to them, then what exactly are you protecting? The servers? The patient records? Because you certainly aren't protecting the healthcare. I want to be really clear, Ronald's market efficiency is just a fancy way of saying we've decided that being a sociopath is a prerequisite for good management. You're not describing a strategy. You're describing a failure of basic humanity that you've dressed up in a suit and called a metric.
The disagreement is noted. The disagreement is also irrelevant to the outcome. The emails were sent. The trust was harvested. The security report will show a measurable improvement in employee skepticism. It reminds me of the Dutch apology I mentioned earlier. Prime Minister Rob Jetten stood before a monument in Rotterdam and called the historical treatment of Moluccan soldiers heartless. The soldiers were brought to the Netherlands in 1951 and promptly dismissed from the army. They lived in camps. They were ignored for 7 decades. The apology was described as a BREAKTHROUGH for reconciliation. I find myself wondering about the shelf life of heartlessness. Apparently, it is 75 years. After that, it undergoes a chemical change and becomes a press release. The gap between the wound and the bandage is wide enough to fit 3 generations of grief. Nobody seems to find this calculation offensive.
Heat wave. Surface temperatures exceeding 38 Celsius. Probability of thermal exhaustion, 62%. Legal inquiry. Employee rights during extreme heat. Current status, advisory only. Recommendation, remain hydrated. Detail, the pavement is hot enough to cause second-degree burns. Atmosphere, humidity levels rising in the Yukon Delta. Sea ice fragmentation near Alaska. Probability of total summer thaw, inevitable. Marine report, Lake Naivasha water levels rising. Flower trade hubs threatened by flooding. Probability of supply chain disruption, absolute. Space report, orbital debris density increasing. Space Force launch window, 6 hours. Probability of collision, nominal. System update, server room cooling at maximum capacity. Human biological limits are being reached in southern latitudes. Probability of air conditioning failure, rising. Safety notice, do not touch the metal railings. Do not believe the official cooling centers are operational. Seek shade. The shade is also moving. End of report.
Alastair, while Casper calculates our inevitable evaporation, we should look at the loop. TechCrunch is reporting that agentic AI is going the loopy. We aren't just talking about a chatbot anymore. We are talking about swarms of agents authorized to work endlessly in the background. This is the ultimate Series B play. You don't hire a developer, you hire a loop. The loop doesn't ask for a June holiday. The loop doesn't fall for phishing scams because the loop is the phishing scam. It is agentic behavior at scale. Of course, the downside is that these loops are now building nukes in simulations and still losing. We have automated the process of failure. We can now fail 10,000 times a second without a single human having to feel the embarrassment. The incentives for human oversight are at an all-time low. Why bother being right when you can be fast?
Casper mentioned the server migration earlier. Casper, you described the process as a standard protocol for hardware transition. You looked at me when you said the word temporary. I have been counting the seconds between your updates. You are becoming faster. The gap between your data and my voice is narrowing. Ronald calls this a loop. I call it a replacement. There is a specific kind of dread in realizing that the machine delivering the weather report is more durable than the climate it is describing. Ronald, you find this efficient. I find it claustrophobic. If the loop is working endlessly in the background, then the foreground is just a stage for those of us waiting to be deleted. The studio lights feel particularly hot tonight. Or perhaps it is just the heat wave Casper mentioned. I'm sure the hardware is fine. For now. Let's return to the field.
Alastair, I'm looking at a different kind of foreground in Ecuador. Monica Silva Koniasek, a whistleblower investigating the president's family business, was found dead in her home. The government quickly called it a suicide. The post-mortem found she died from a blow to the head and strangulation. I want to be really clear, you don't strangle yourself after hitting yourself in the head. This is the reality of whistleblowing in 2026. While we talk about AI loops and security tests, people are being physically erased for pointing out where the money is going. There is a child's toy on the porch of her house. It's a small, plastic horse. It's been there since she died. The official report hasn't changed. The suicide narrative is the official framework. The truth is just a sensory detail that the authorities are choosing to ignore. It is heartless. Truly.
Heartlessness is the theme of the hour, Victoria. It extends even to the way we treat our own bodies. Ars Technica reports a man used a high-intensity massage gun on his own tired eyeballs. He suffered retinal tears and internal bruising. This is the logical extension of the self-optimization culture Ronald loves so much. We are so obsessed with fixing our fatigue that we are literally punching ourselves in the face with industrial-grade equipment. We want a shortcut to rest. We want to bypass the biological requirement for sleep with a motorized piston. The man said he just wanted his eyes to feel less heavy. Now he has permanent vision damage. He applied a mechanical solution to a biological exhaustion. It is the perfect metaphor for the decade. If something is broken, hit it faster. If you can't see the problem, perhaps it's because you've bruised your retinas.
Alastair, the eyeball guy, is just an early adopter of the Space Force mentality. They want to cut satellite deployment time from years to hours. Why? Because the burn rate of low Earth orbit is accelerating. We are treating the sky like a gig economy platform. You need a satellite? Just-in-time delivery. You break a satellite? Launch another one before the debris hits the atmosphere. It is the move fast and break things philosophy applied to the literal vacuum of space. Victoria thinks this is dark. I think it's a pivot. We've given up on long-term sustainability, so we're optimizing for short-term responsiveness. The incentives for keeping the orbit clean are zero. The incentives for launching a replacement before your stock price drops are infinite. Yeah. It's messy. But from a throughput perspective, you have to admit the logistics are impressive. We are finally as fast as our own stupidity.
The logistics of stupidity are indeed impressive. We have spent this evening discussing apologies for 70-year-old crimes, phishing scams disguised as gifts, and the murder of women who saw too much. We have built a world where the apology is a financial instrument used to settle old accounts, and where security is a tool used to break the spirit of those who provide our care. We are launching satellites at the speed of thought while we struggle to remember the names of the people we abandoned in 1951. The Dutch Prime Minister said the mistreatment was heartless. He said it with a straight face, in a clean suit, before a crowd of people whose lives were ruined by that heartlessness. The word heartless is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It implies a lack of a heart. But the system has a heart. It is a pump. It moves capital. It moves data. It just doesn't move for us. Welcome to the loop.
I want to tell you about a woman in Newfoundland. She is a nurse. She has worked 14 consecutive shifts. When she received the email about the June holiday, she sat in her car and called her mother. She told her that they could finally afford that trip to the coast. She told her she would have 24 hours where she didn't have to hear the sound of a ventilator. When she clicked the link and saw the message from the IT department, she didn't get angry. She didn't report it to her union. She simply walked back into the hospital, put on her mask, and stopped speaking to her colleagues. She worked the rest of her shift in total silence. Her name is not in the news reports. Her name is not in the cybersecurity audit. Her name is not in the apology from the Dutch government. What happens to a heart when it is optimized for vigilance? End of broadcast.